Hi guys, this is Atco. Haven't done a video for quite a while. But what got me into this is that for the last month or two on Comcast, they've been playing a lot of the old science fiction movies from the 1950s. And I grew up mostly in the 60s, but from all those old movies of the 50s, those old science fiction movies, boy, I used to see them all the time and bring back a lot of memories. I've got a collection of my own, not too many of them, but a lot of the areas, mostly the 50s, some from earlier than that and some from later than that. And I thought I'd show what of my collection I've had, and those are my favorite, for the most part, of the movies that I enjoyed. And I want to see whether you guys might like them yourself. Do keep in mind, these old movies, they might have had a good plan with them, a good story, but you know, they sure didn't have much as far as the special effects back in the 50s. So don't worry about those things. Don't start thinking these movies are no good because they look so old. Forget real quick about the old cars, forget the people, the music. Just try to get back at what the story was, and just read it from that standpoint, and you just might enjoy them. Now, the first one I want to show, on the top of my shelf, the whole shelf is all for the Planet of the Apes. That first movie came out, the Planet of the Apes, came in 1968, and that was a great one. You know, where people came from, astronauts came in from one Earth and planned to crash into another planet. When they get into the planet, the people are still civilized, but they were all apes rather than humans. Very good story. It's a big story. They did 5 movies of that, 4 sequels, because it was so popular. To me, the first 3 were the best ones. Original, The Planet of the Apes. Then in 1970, the Beneath of the Planet of the Apes. And then after that was the Escape to the Planet of the Apes, which was done in 1971. I would think you will enjoy it if you've never seen it before. Great movies. Okay, now another one, these are on my second shelf, and I start showing what the DVDs that I have. The one was a 1951 movie called The Day the Earth Stood Still. And that's a good story in there. Not a lot of special effects, but a great story where a guy from another planet came in, tried to tell people they need to get their act together. That's basically it, but it was a very good movie, very popular science fiction. The Day the Earth Stood Still. Okay, the next one I got on there is called the Forbidden Planet. That's from 1956, and that's where astronauts came in to come back to a planet where they had another group that had gone to figure that planet, to try that. Then they had a first crew that came into another planet and they crashed there, and they didn't know if everybody was killed or not, and it took 20 years to have a second crew to come in, and this crew came in to find out what was still going on while they came in. So I won't go any more than that, but I think you might enjoy that. Forbidden Planet from 1956. Okay, now this one, as I have a t-shirt in my, about one of these. If you look at my t-shirt, you'll see that this was a good movie I liked, called The Island of Dr. Moreau. Now, that's a movie, it was a novel from the H.G. Wells back in 1896. Was finally put out as a movie in 1932, and they called it The Island of Lost Souls. But then it came out again, and like I have on in this t-shirt, it was called The Island of Dr. Moreau, and it was in 1977, and the doctor that was there was starred by Burt Lancaster. And then the movie was done again in 1996 with Marlon Brando as the doctor. Both of those two, with Burt Lancaster and Marlon Brando, both of those are great movies. I think I kind of like the one from '77 a little bit better, but the last one from 1996, the special effects are even better than they were in '77, and you can really enjoy both of these. What the movie is about is that a doctor, as like a scientist, goes into an island and he starts playing with the genes of the animals and trying to see if any of those can be more into humans, or they can find humans can learn things from animals. Great movies, great movies. So we can't go wrong with either the '77 or the '96 version. Next is a movie called It, the Terror from Beyond Space. That was in 1958. With this movie, they had come back to in Mars, and there had been a crew in before that something happened there, and they think it crashed, and they know whatever happened to the people that were in it the first time. So they brought a second crew in, probably, I don't know how many years it goes, but they came back to see if there's anybody left. So when they got into the second crew back into the Mars, only one person was left. And the movie was just bring him in, and they thought that he had something to do to kill the other people that were there. And the trip of trying to go Mars back to Earth, there was an alien that got stuck into the ship, and the whole movie was the ship trying to get everybody. Okay, now I've got a couple other movies there that are even older than that. These were 30 years old since I was a kid. But they were great, great movies. Either one of these were done in the 30s, maybe the early 40s. And if you just listen to the story and watch it, They were very good. They won't have the special effects like you're going to have today. Forget about that and just listen to the story, and they were great. One is called Frankenstein. Came in 1931. And it was a novel from 1818 by Mary Shelley. The movie was done in 1931 and starred Boris Karloff as Frankenstein, the monster. Along with that is Dracula. It's kind of a vampire type movie. That was originally as a novel in 1897. Was done as a movie in 1922 called Nosferatu. It was, I believe it was all silent, and was done again in 1931 and called Dracula, starring Bela Lugosi. Okay, and then also along with one of those old movies called The Wolfman. This movie was done in 1941, starring Lon Chaney Jr. Now that was written as a screenplay back in the 1930s, and was first put out as a movie in 1935 called The Werewolf of London, but didn't do real well, and then was done again in 1941 and called The Wolfman, and that was become the classic. All three of those were really great classic horror movies back from around the 30s. They're great and good movies to watch. Again, I bring this in again. Everything's old in there. You got to think that this is almost 100 years old. But if once you forget about the special effects and you just listen to the stories, they're great. Very great. Very great movies. Okay, we'll move down to another level of my shelves. One is the War of the Worlds. And that was also a novel from H.G. Wells, and was put out as a movie back in 1953. This was very good, just with a group from Mars come in to decide to take over the world. Very, very good movie done. Was done again, maybe 20 years ago. Has more special effects than the ones from the 50s, of course. But I think the one from the 50s has a little bit more of a story to it, and very classic. Okay, now this one called Phantom of Space from 1953. This isn't bad. Not the best one. It's just a guy came in from another planet. He got out by himself and he was kind of stuck and didn't know where to go, and of course everybody went after him, and as he was trying to get away, all these people were after him. It's kind of interesting to watch. What gets me with that one, that movie came in 1953, and when I was a kid, I went with my dad. He wanted to see one of his friends from work, and he said, "Why don't you come with me?" I was going to show him some stuff. So this was probably 1959, something like that. I was maybe 6 years old, something like that. Never heard of the movie, and my dad was just spending time with my friend, and it wasn't anything interesting to me. So while I was there, one of his kids was watching old science fiction movies. Well, of course, they weren't that old at that time. And we went down to watch TV, and this was a movie that was on. Now, I was only 6 or 7 years ago, and this thing scared the heck out of me, watching that thing. And because of that one, when I look at it now, it's not as scary as it was when I was 6 or 7, but at that time it did. And I had to have a copy of this because this will bring me back. It's the first time I ever saw that. Okay, then, now, here's one called The Thing, from Another World. That came in 1951. Again, they found a alien from another world had crashed into the Arctic, and they found it one day and they opened it up to see what was in there. They cut him out of the ice, and sure enough he thawed, and that was the movie from there. And the idea is, what are we going to do with him? It's a good movie though. It's got a lot of suspense to it. Came out again probably about 20-25 years ago. Was another one, and they did a very, very good job on that too, called The Thing. Okay, now on the side, back in the 80s, they used to play a lot of the old science fiction movies back from the 50s, 40s, 60s, and they'd be on like Saturday afternoon, Saturday at night, and you'd go and you'd play a couple of these old movies. They made so many of these back in the 50s that they would play these things while you're watching them, and it would be kind of fun to watch them if nothing else. And some of them were very, very good. A lot of them were very, very bad. But they had a host that would talk during the show when they were showing off the science fiction movies. And they had a host that they called her the Elvira, the Mistress of the Dark. This girl was set up, dressed up, and she would have funny talk, and she would talk about in between the movies and talk about the different scenes during the movies. Never would talk more than 3-4 minutes, but every 10-15 minutes she would bring in something about it. Oh man, she was she's beautiful. And we all had to sit there and watch these old movies. If you don't remember Elvira, won't mean too much of these old movies. But I have a couple of her DVDs of one of the better songs that did come out, different movies. And also get to watch those, and also listen to her little spiel that she would have every 10-15 minutes. The couple good movies that I have in there is one called The Night of the Living Dead. It was done in 1968, kind of a zombies movie. And then another one called The Little Shop of Horrors from 1960. Again, a very good one. It was kind of a comedy of science fiction movies about a man-eating plant. But it turned out to be a pretty good movie. It was done again, I don't know, maybe 30 years ago. by another group. But back in the 60s, it even had Jack Nicholson in it. Then along with that, I got one that's a little more newer, called Mars Attacks. That was a movie done in 1996, and it was a science fiction comedy about just Martian come in and try to take over the world. But it was comedy. Jack Nicholson was the president in the movie. I thought it was very funny, very funny. And then one of my favorites, all my favorites from 1960, is The Time Machine. It was a novel by H.G. Wells back in 1895. Now this movie was done in 1960, and they did a beautiful job of that, of the time machine, where some guy, he was a scientist, he had built himself a time machine and wanted to go forward and see what happens in the world, in the future. Great, great movie. The main actor in there was Rod Taylor. This is definitely, if any of those that I would recommend to take first would be The Time Machine. And you'll see I also have a little, all of my shelf, if I have a chance to get a little, like a robot or a monster or a little statue of anything for those, if I've been able to get one, I put one in. When I had the time machine, there wasn't anything I could get that was already built without paying $300. And I found a guy who would make the kit of the little model of the time machine. I think it was about $60, and I had to put it together. But it looks great, and I love that thing. Okay, now, those are all what I consider to be very, very good movies. Again, there was at least 100 or more movies that were done that weren't all that good. But those were the ones I gave are ones that are worthwhile to listen to, even though they're so old. There's also a couple more that are so bad, they've become a cult, kind of a classic cult, that people actually watch them today because they're so funny. They weren't meant to be funny, but they were done so poor and so well that people like to watch them now. And those things, these two movies, one called Planet 9 from Outer Space, and the other is called The Robot Monster. Now both of those you could consider the worst movie ever made, whether it's science fiction or any other. They're that poorly done. Yet, if you want into that just to watch that, I mean, if you saw Seinfeld had a movie once, one of the Seinfeld shows, he had to go to watch that because they were going to play Plan 9 from Outer Space, and he didn't want to move anything so that he couldn't go see that, because we had to see that, the worst movie ever seen. So go see that first. And the Robot Monster, which one is worse, I don't know. To show you how bad this movie was, they did this whole movie in 4 days, and the cost, back from 1953, the cost was $14,000. That tells you how well it was right there. But when they were trying to put this thing, they needed to have an alien, and they couldn't afford the cost to have an alien costume. So one guy had a old gorilla suit, probably from I don't know whether it's from a movie or from a costume party. He said, "I'll use that, but I'll make like a space helmet, and we'll make that the alien." I mean, it was pretty bad. Of course, everybody's not very good in it. And yet now, because of those two, Planet 9 from Outer Space and the Robot Monster, are classic cult now for old science fiction movies. If you could deal with it, I would recommend see either one of them. Of course, I have both of those DVDs in my collection. Okay, guys, well, that's it for now. I hope you can tell me what you think of some of those movies or remember some of those. And it was good to see you guys. Yes, it hasn't been a while since I've had anything, and if this goes well, hopefully I'll do a few more. Okay, so this is Atco saying off.